A new federal program has funding earmarked to feed hungry South Dakota children over the summertime. The summer EBT program would affect the same kids who already qualify for the free or reduced school lunches.
There is a hurdle, though. The state needs to officially request the money, and that may not be happening. Beth Warden brings us a story of a state lawmaker who is working to create a bipartisan movement to ask the state to reconsider their decision.
About 30% of South Dakota children qualify to receive meals through the Nutrition Assistance Program at school. Representative Linda Duba is working to help the same children when school is out.
We're talking about hungry children in South Dakota. And it is a proven fact that those are some of the hungriest kids in the summer because they are not in school getting their breakfast or lunch.
She's met families who qualify.
And they're the working poor. They're working hard. The parents of the families who need free and reduced lunch.
The summer EBT program would provide $40 per month in food.
So we load the funding onto the card once a month. It's an EBT card.
I contacted the Department of Education asking if the funds would be requested. Duba asked the same question and received a list as to why the state plans to pass on the money, including having unreliable student data and that some children were inadvertently missed in the data.
How do you know they were missed if you say the data is unreliable?
IT logistics were also a reason.
Is there a process to setting that up? Yes. There might be some minor IT work that's required.
Duba is connecting with lawmakers of both parties.
Well, it's a nonpartisan issue to lobby the governor, the Department of Social Services, and the Department of Education to change their stance and to apply for this grant and offer the permanent summer feeding program.
Funding includes the cost to administer the summer EBT program.
And is that what we really want to do? We want to be branded as the state that decided not to help feed children throughout the summer?
You can look up each school in the state and how many children would qualify for the summer EBT program. That's at dakotanewsnow.com. In Sioux Falls, Beth Warden, Dakota News Now.
And we have heard back from the Department of Education, a spokesperson confirming that the state will not be requesting the EBT summer funds, citing other feeding programs and a heavy administrative cost burden.